Now this might be the worst video that I ever record, but this is week 3 of the Champions League recaps. Yes, the series has moved on. It has been downgraded. No more green screens. It's just too long. Like genuinely, I've been fighting battles, thinking about if I should just drop the series as a whole or just make it more low effort and put it on a second channel. And I've decided to not let the few that watched, the first parts to this series down. I'm bringing it back, but in the dark. No lights, laptop in hand, and the notes in front of me. This can still be good. So let's talk about all the Champions League fixtures that happened in this week's Champions League game week, which was game week 3, and there was a bunch of goals. I think it actually had the record all-time goals scored in a single Champions League match week of all time. Like 71 goals in, 18 games. And let's start off with Tuesday's games, which had a whopping 43 goals in 9 games. That's an average of 4.3 per game. Yes, for people that like maths, you're going to appreciate that fact. It's actually 4.8. So let's start off with an absolute bang where Titans clashed with mere mortals. Me and Burkinho sat through this game in absolute awe. Let's talk about Leverkusen getting battered 7-2 by PSG. A side based in West Germany were hosting the Parisian Giants and arguably the best team on earth right now. Holders of the Champions League in last year's all-round titans of European competitions and world football. And it's like this team hasn't skipped a beat because going into this competition, they have just dominated once again. But that wouldn't matter to these Leverkusen players because they would concede within the first 10 minutes of the game. From an easily worked corner, Nuno Mendes would whip the ball back into the box and Pancho would be there to head the ball into the back of the net. 1-0 PSG. But now it was time for Leverkusen to get what was finally theirs. They would have an opportunity with Echeverri taking on into this PSG box and get brought down by Zabarni. Is that his name? Zabarni. He used to play for Bournemouth last season. Zabarni would fall over, taking out Echeverri and touching the ball with his hand. And then Grimaldo would step up for Leverkusen and take the penalty, but would absolutely miss. This was not like Grimaldo. You don't give him opportunities like this and he wastes them like that. And this moment just killed all hope that Leverkusen fans had going into the rest of this game. And this hope would actually diminish even more, like if you were to get a hair transplant and then after the hair transplant, your hair falls out again. Because in the 32nd minute, Andrich would decide to elbow Desiree Doué into the head, specifically the mouth area, and get sent straight off the pitch. And now all hope was completely lost. Something like Luffy in the Sabaody Archipelago arc of One Piece, when all his crewmates were just getting taken out by Bartholomew Kuma, put into these bubbles and sent to different countries. Usopp, you're going away. See you later, mate. And Leverkusen fans just looked outraged. But that was until the 36th minute when Kafane got his own back. He would be gifted a ball over the top and the PSG centre-backs would decide to try and squeeze him. But ultimately in the process they would take him down, with Zabarni actually being the guy who perpetrated the tackle and foul on Kafane. And due to this stupid mistake, Leverkusen would draw 1-1 on the night and Zabarni would be sent straight off the pitch, making it a 10 versus 10 game. But then PSG pulled out the Buster call. Time for this island to go down. Leverkusen, we gave you your little chance. You can take the penalty, but now it's time for all the ships to come in and start shooting at your goal and to start destroying your entire team. And just 4 minutes after this call was made, Desiree Doué and Kavicha would link up before Doué would put the ball into the back of the net. Then 3 minutes after that, PSG are penetrating the Leverkusen box. Kavicha has a shot blocked, then on the second attempt, he puts it into the back of the net again. Then on the brink of half time, a smooth transition would lead to Desiree Doué getting too much time and space and he would just slot it into the corner of the goal, making it 4-1. And in the second half, PSG just continued this ruthless display of aggression. There was no remorse for the weak. As in the 49th minute, Vitinha would be seen driving through and put a ball in behind to Nuno Mendes. And he would slot the ball home, giving him a goal and an assist on the night. Stats that you don't see from the average fullback, and he is establishing himself as one of the best left backs in football. Like sometimes I genuinely forget that Nuno Mendes and the likes of Hakimi are fullbacks because they play so high up that I just associate them with winger roles or, wide midfielders. And time again, when put on the grand stage and playing in these big Champions League games, they show the world who they really are. Now the score would be 5-1, but Leverkusen would finally they would get their lick back. Because Alex Garcia said, nah, I am leaving here with something. I need a story to tell my grandkids. It's like when your parents go to your football game and you're losing the game. Bro, you have to leave there with something, man. Get a goal or put a big challenge in and take out a leg. And Garcia saw his family in the stands. If he didn't do this in the game, he was not getting breakfast tomorrow morning. Because in the 53rd minute, he would casually lace in the ball from like 25 yards out. Just completely against the run of play. No celebration, no nothing. He knew his team had already failed him. He just scored a banger, didn't really care, and the game just moved on with ease. But of course, PSG would continue the ritual that they had begun. With Barcola through on goal, he would square the ball to Ousmane Dembele, who would make it 6 on the night. And it wasn't over just yet, because in the 89th minute, Vitinha would also score, making it 7. 7-2, a dramatic win, but we have not got time to talk about anything else apart from this game. We got to move on, because there was another high scoring game on this same exact night where Barcelona beat Olympiacos 6-1. And the man of the moment was Fermin Lopez, who got a hat-trick in this game. Within around 40 minutes, Fermin Lopez had grabbed 2 goals in this game, and he just time and time again is showing his class and abilities on a football pitch. And he's reminding me a lot of a young Cesc Fabregas at Arsenal. The way he's just leading the team, showing authority in the midfield and attacking with dynamism. But despite his goals, Olympiacos would throw a spanner in the works, stopping the wheel that was turning for Barcelona and halting their goal onslaught. With Al-Kaabi actually scoring in open play, then the referee stopping the game and actually giving a penalty when the ball had already gone into the back of the net. It made no sense whatsoever. Honestly, the referee needed to be checked out in this entire fixture, because there were numerous occasions of dodgy dealings, fraudulent activities that looked like they were in Barcelona's favour. Because I don't even know what would have happened if, Kaabi scored the header, and then what if when he gave the penalty, he missed the penalty? That's so unfair, and it needs to be fixed. I don't know what was going through this referee's head. And it got even worse, because in the 57th minute, Olympiacos saw one of their players get sent off. And if you see it back, this was not a foul. This was not a foul in game speed, slow motion. It doesn't matter what vision you were seeing. 3D, you could have been on the pitch given a 4D experience, and this would have still not been a red card. But there we go, Barcelona were given a little advantage even though they were winning already in the game. And from then the rest of the fixture would just look like a training match, because Barcelona would just play about with it. With Barcelona then getting all the decisions at this point, Lamine Yamal getting a penalty and slotting it away, making him the youngest player to 25 Champions League appearances. And let's not talk about the penalty. Forget the penalty, but the build up to the penalty was all Marcus Rashford. Marcus Rashford in this game was outstanding. And people keep telling me to talk about Rashford. I made an entire segment about Rashford when he played Newcastle in the Champions League a few weeks back. And you can go and check out that video. It's on the main channel. But people keep asking me to talk about Rashford in players locked in this season. Bro, I get that he's locked in, but he's really locked in the Champions League. He's showing up when it really matters, and there's going to be a big dilemma when Rafinha comes back fresh from injury, what Hansi Flick does in this situation, because I actually think that Rashford's played better than Lamine Yamal in this little segment of the year. And it would be Rashford that would add to the tally of goals in this game to make it 4-1. Arrowing in a strike from an angle with no movement required. He just did it just like that, which is a pinpoint little shot. And Rashford is looking as sharp as ever. Then just a few minutes later, Fermin Lopez would complete his hat-trick with Rooney on that right-hand side, turning into a prime Ronaldinho, hitting a flip-flap Elastico style and then putting a fluky ball into the box that Lopez would slot away. And that was not even it, because the best goal on the night was to do with, again, Marcus Rashford. With Pedri giving the ball to Rashford, he would touch the ball down like he had velvet on the top of his boots, deading the ball and just slotting the ball home, making it 6-1, and a brilliant game for Barcelona fans, but a terrible one for Olympiacos ones. Barcelona would end the game with like 72% possession and 14 shots on the night, a dominant display which was needed in a time like this going into an El Clasico on the weekend. An El Clasico that we'll definitely cover on this channel, so of course put your notifications on and stay tuned. Now we take it till El Haramico, the tale of two terrorists that play football. It is Arsenal versus Atletico Madrid, and Arsenal beat the allegations. Because in a game that was predicted to be an absolute bore fest, Arsenal came out at home and decided, let me actually play football for once. Arteta setting up his men with guile and agility and aggression, directness. Eze was having opportunities. There was many chances in that first half for Arsenal to get the first goal of the night, but they didn't. It was silence. They just couldn't finish their dinner. It was like they had an eating disorder. But then in the second half, they were introduced to Morley's because that tasty chicken was there to munch. You know what? Bun Morley's anyway. Let's talk about Pepe's. Pepe's. Yeah? I'm talking about Pepe's chicken. But this hunger that Arsenal had would eventually be satisfied, and in the 57th minute, it would be Gabriel getting Arsenal's first goal on the night. And of course, this goal would come from a set piece. So realistically, Arteta didn't beat the allegations because over 70% of Arsenal's goals this season have come from set pieces, whether it's free kicks or corners. That is an absolutely crazy stat, and it needs to be looked at because in the big games, of course, this is the skill that we all want, the ability to score from set pieces. But eventually, Arsenal's luck is going to run out. They're not going to be scoring every single week from a set piece. But that's when they're going to need the guys on the floor to take control and start creating chances, but also finishing them off. And finish them off they would do after this first goal was broken, because it seems like this is the pattern. Arsenal need that set piece goal to, break the waters. But then after that, it's just free flowing. With Lewis Skelly putting in an amazing performance and drive for this second goal, driving up the pitch before Martinelli was peeling off to the left-hand side. He would put a lovely ball into his feet, just ahead of his feet. Martinelli would run onto the ball first time in an Henry-esque open up your body finish and slot it into the far right corner of the goal, with Oblak actually getting a hand to it, and it just being a beautiful finish from Martinelli, who seems to have found his form in the league and also Champions League this season. He's picked himself up and brought him to the same level as the likes of Trossard, who was keeping him out, of the starting 11 for so many weeks. And I'm really happy looking at it as a Martinelli supporter, someone that has never really slandered him outwardly. And then after making it 2-0, we would see Gyökeres get a couple of goals, with a dodgy one coming in the 67th minute, which was honestly one of the ugliest goals I've ever seen in my entire life. And then the last goal being a ball whipped into the box by Rice, Gabriel would header it on, and Gyökeres would be there to thrust it home, to say the least. An amazing game filled with goals, but we have to talk about another game that had even more goals, with Copenhagen losing 2-4 to Borussia Dortmund. After 20 minutes in the game, you'd seen Nemecha finish off a beautiful piece of team play, with a lot of these Borussia Dortmund players linking up, and Nemecha being on the edge of the D and just finishing it off simply. Like, this is not an easy finish, but Nemecha made it look simple. Then from a Larsson corner, Copenhagen would fire the ball at goal, and eventually it would, end up into the back of the net via an own goal. But this would not disrupt the flow of play for Borussia Dortmund, because Dortmund would then be gifted a penalty via a silly decision in the box. This is not the type of mistake that you should be making in this area of the pitch. And again, it would be Bensebaini taking it. My rival. I actually hate this guy with a passion. I don't understand. Maybe he might be a better penalty taker, but I need Guirassy to start taking these penalties. Not because, I just like Guirassy, but maybe it is because I like Guirassy. I want to see him prosper. I don't want to see Bensebaini in my life, let alone him taking a penalty and scoring it. I'm hate watching Bensebaini, because this is the same guy that sold last year. Was it in the semi-finals or the quarter-finals against Borussia Dortmund, where he scored an own goal when Dortmund could actually had an amazing game and won against Barcelona, with Guirassy scoring a hat-trick in the game. Get away. He scored an own goal against Barcelona. Then in the 76th minute, Nemecha would get his second on the night, punishing a mistake by the goalkeeper. And then from the Metro scoring, it would be Fabio Silva late on in the game at like the 87th minute. You know, a name that I hadn't heard in years. You know, last time I checked, this guy was at Wolves. What the hell? How did he even end up in Germany? And despite a 17-year-old Victor Dawson getting a goal right at the depths of the game, it would just be a consolation and Dortmund would take the victory, with Dawson becoming the third youngest Champions League scorer in the history of the competition. Next up, we head to St James's Park, which featured a 3-0 victory over Jose Mourinho's Benfica, the Benfica side that I actually support on weekends. And from the start, it actually looked promising. You know, Mourinho's Benfica were playing some decent moves, with Luca Bacchio actually having multiple opportunities to score. It was just not his day. You know, multiple chances where he was cutting in and whipping the ball at goal, and it just wasn't coming off. But in a game like this, in a scenario against Newcastle, in a Champions League phase where you need the points, one of these has to come off. You have to get the goal. Otherwise, you have to start passing the ball and get another guy to start shooting in these same positions. But that didn't happen, and Newcastle would eventually capitalise, with them just needing one transition where Murphy would sweep the ball into the path of Anthony Gordon, who of course put it into the back of the net, continuing his great form in this competition. Then in the 70th minute, we would see, you know, a FIFA-like goal. Something that you don't really see unless it's a video game. This was incredible. The Newcastle goalkeeper Nick Pope would receive the ball in his hands, run to the edge of his box and launch the ball with his arm. This ball would go about, I don't know, 60 yards into a path of a Newcastle player, that being Harvey Barnes, who would eventually from this action get a goal, making it 2-0. Deaded the game. This was not normal. This was some sort of kickoff glitch, you know, starting the game again, but this actually came from Benfica's opportunity. Then in the 83rd minute, we would see some brilliant link-up play by the likes of Walter Made and Gordon before the ball get played into the path of Harvey Barnes, who would finish it off. And I have to give a little round of applause. You know, Braquinho, come on, round of applause. Okay, he doesn't really applaud unless he's seeing Messi, Ronaldo, Jib play live. So unfortunately, he's not going to give Walter Made the props. But I will tell you that Walter Made is coming across as one of the better strikers this year. Like, I'm really liking the link-up play, his agility on the ball, his stature is just amazing. He just brings people into play. And honestly, I'm hoping that his form continues throughout the entire season. And I did a segment on the main channel where we talked about him being locked in this season. And it just continues once again. And, you know, no credit to me, but credit to him. You know, he's become one of my favorites. And now we got to head over to a game between PSV and Napoli. You know, on paper, this should have been easy. You know, everyone makes a prediction. You know, you see PSV and you're seeing Napoli, the champions of the Serie A last season. They won the Italian league. McTominay getting MVP of the season. And then you look at the result. PSV won this game 6-2. And when you watch it back, they deserved the victory. This was not a scammed victory. This was wholehearted. This was a dominant display. This was a turning of, you know, a generation. Napoli have not started this season in great fashion. And it was weird because early on in the game, it would be McTominay who put the ball into the back of the net first. And it was looking like a routine win for Antonio Conte's men. But then we see a Napoli own goal. You know, this guy must have got paid off by some dodgy dealer. You know, on New Star Soccer, when you get the message, oh, a shady character is offering you $10 to rig the game. This guy rigged the game because he scores an own goal and it just changes the entire momentum and everything that was going to happen. Because just 3 minutes after this goal was given away, PSV would forge a transition counter-attack, with Saibari finishing off the move after a bit of tidy combination play. Then in the 54th minute, we see a brilliant piece of link-up play with Dennis Mann starting the move and finishing it, leading a move on the right-hand side before ending up inside the box and finishing it off too, dinking the ball through the keeper's legs. Then in the 76th minute, things just got worse for Napoli fans because we would see Luca getting sent off via dissent, meaning that he must have said something to the referee when the referee made a decision, and it was that bad. I don't know what he said to him, what he said about his mum, or his head shape, or his hairstyle, or his boots that he's wearing, or the fact that referees wear high socks even though they wear no shin pads. I don't know what he said to him, but he got a straight, you know, he just said, nah, get off the pitch. Then just 4 minutes after that decision, again, PSV capitalized on something that happened to Napoli, with Dennis Mann cutting in and scoring an amazing goal. A strike that just hits the top corner and just rockets into the back of the net, stamping his name onto football, because I haven't heard the name Dennis Mann in ages. You know, this guy was seemingly unknown for a lot of people. But after this game, people are going to be talking about this guy like, wait, who's that again? And despite McTominay getting a consolation just after that, PSV would continue the antics of scoring again and again, with them getting a goal in the 87th minute and then in the 89th, making it 6-2 and just deflating Napoli fans. And there was this guy that came on, I don't know what his name was, like Ryoshi or something like that. He would come on for PSV and honestly be a bright spark. You know, when they needed a little bit more energy, a little bit more life, he came on and started skilling up people, you know, breaking down the play, getting involved and just creating chances, which ultimately led to, you know, I think a couple of the late goals. He's someone that we definitely need to keep an eye out of. You know, I've never seen him play, but, you know, other than this game. And yeah. But from one Italian giant sinking when they're needed most to another who overcame, you know, a Belgian side 4-0. Let's talk about Inter Milan versus USG, because some people are still counting out this Inter Milan side. This is the same side that went to a Champions League final just last year and went toe-to-toe with some of your favourite teams. With late and great wins against the likes of Barcelona, Inter Milan defied all odds. And that wasn't just down to their manager, despite him getting all the praise, because this season they are playing, you know, just as good, being dominant in both the Serie A and also the Champions League. However, I must say, after watching this back, this has to be one of the most wasteful 4-0 victories I have ever seen in my life. Because although Inter Milan scored 4, you know, won the game 4-0, they could have scored like 9 or 10 goals. Denzel Dumfries would score the opener on the night, making it 1-0 in the 41st minute. And then just after missing an absolute sitter, Lautaro Martinez would score in added time of the first half, via a Denzel Dumfries cutback pass into his path. Then Inter Milan are gifted a penalty which Çalhanoğlu slots away. Then we see some nice play from the Marcus Thuram regen Boni, who puts it across the box to Esposito, who puts it in to the goal, making it 4-0. And these are two players that I'm really liking the look of in the moments that I've seen them play. Esposito and Boni. And I'm not talking about Jewelry Boni from One Piece. Yeah, she's heavily impacted the story right now. Well, what I'm reading anyway. Don't spoil me. But yeah, Inter Milan won that 4-0, and now we go into a game between Manchester City and Villarreal, which honestly was just a standard game. You know, nothing crazy happened. Haaland would grab his goal, Bernardo Silva would grab a goal, and Villarreal wouldn't really fret this Manchester City team. That is 12 games in a row now that Haaland has scored, by the way. 12 games. And let's also give a shout out to Savio, who not only set up the goal that Bernardo Silva put into the back of the net, but was also, you know, quite savage on that right hand side. You know, he was showing some skills and some tricks and flicks that we haven't seen from him in a while. You know, this was supposedly the regen of Riyad Mahrez, and you know, it's been a disappointment since people made that claim, but it looks like Savio's got his swag back. And although me downplaying it, Villarreal did have about 11 shots in the game. There were chances where they could have scored even before Manchester City got the first goal on the night, but Villarreal were just sloppy, and this is Manchester City picking up a win against a side that are third in La Liga, a Manchester City side that are getting downplayed in all competitions this season, despite the other contenders actually slipping up themselves. Now let's head into the Wednesday games, day 2, which had again some brilliant fixtures, great clashes, and a lot of goals too. Whoa, okay, is this dead? One of the lights have just gone off on this tripod, and that is completely unreliable, and maybe I'm gonna have to switch seats. Nah, let me just stay here, you know. If both lights go off, we're just going to continue the video in darkness. I don't even care. Like, this is a second channel video anyway. You know, I'm just sorry to the editor of this video. First off, we have to talk about Frankfurt versus Liverpool, which Liverpool won 5-1, and they just showed that despite losing many games in a row, they were not going to lose 5 in a row. But at the start of this game, it looked like they were going to lose 5 in a row because they would concede the first goal on the night to Frankfurt. With an amazing bit of play by the Frankfurt players, Christiansen would get, a bit of too much space and put it into the bottom corner. Then in a bit of smooth transition counter-attacking play by Liverpool, we would see Ekitike be ruthless against his ex-side, scoring a goal that would silence the doubters and again put a lot of questions in people's minds. Ekitike seems to be getting left out a lot in the Liverpool starting 11, especially in the Premier League, where he's been dropped for Isak numerous times. And in this fixture, Arne Slot said, you know what? I'm going to play Isak, I'm going to play Ekitike, and I'm also going to play Wirtz and Cody Gakpo. And it worked out because he realized that you actually can get away with playing 2 strikers in football. This is not something that is mythical. If you have the right strikers, you can do it. And despite Isak failing to deceive and not getting a goal in this game, there were multiple opportunities where he could have scored. But, he just didn't have his shooting boots on like he hasn't had them on for the entirety of this season so far. But the other players in this system were looking quite confident. With Wirtz on that right-hand side, I was seeing a different style of play. And you'll see when I talk about the later goals in this game that Wirtz was involved. After this goal by Ekitike, Virgil van Dijk would come to rescue the game and score a header from a corner, commanding in the air and bringing back the momentum to these Liverpool players. And this pattern would just repeat itself with Ibrahima Konate scoring a header as well, making it 3-1 on the night. Then in the 66th minute, we would see Wirtz flourish in this position where he would cut the ball back into Cody Gakpo, who would put it into the net. And then Dominic Szoboszlai would get a bit too much time and space near the edge of the box and just firmly slide it across the floor of the pitch, and it would go into the bottom corner. 5-1 Liverpool, and they had just reversed the fixture that looked like it was getting out of hand. But yeah, my overall thoughts for this Liverpool game is that, let's just not get ahead of ourselves when doubting this Liverpool side. Once they get their act together and start playing cohesively, it's going to be a problem. We just have to wait for that moment to come. I think Arne Slot has a lot of big decisions to make in terms of the Salah situation, because Salah hasn't been playing good. That is not something that we have to argue about. It's something that is just a fact at this point in time. He has not played good this season, and it's time that he gets dropped. Your salary doesn't define whether you play or not. In football, if you're playing badly and you're actually being detrimental to your entire team, then you need to be pulled aside and not be playing. And Wirtz is getting, shifted off to the left when, in all honesty, he looked perfect on that right-hand side. And I think he can do damage there when is needed. Now let's move on to Chelsea winning 5-1 against Ajax. And there's probably a lot of Chelsea fans that want me to talk about this and glaze them. But let's be real, yeah. At the start of the game, Ajax's Kenneth Taylor just decided to get a red card. I don't know what was going through his head with this stupid challenge that just ruined the entire game. This was literally 15 minutes into this game. This brother puts in the worst challenge I've ever seen in my life. I don't know what he's thinking and just gets sent off. You know how annoyed I was watching this game? It was just like, no, what are you doing? And then from there, just Chelsea would just take it to these Ajax players. With Mark Gui, scoring Chelsea's first on the night. Now, I don't know if that's how you pronounce his name. I don't even care. But he finished off an amazing chance that was kept alive by Fofana, who headed the ball across to him and he just tapped it into the back of the net. Then in the 27th minute, you would see Moises Caicedo, pop a long shot, but it would get deflected and again, go into the goal, making it 2. Then in the 33rd minute, we would see Wout Weghorst score a penalty. Yeah. Given a penalty, penalties everywhere in this game. Let me just give you a penalty. Let me give you a penalty. Do you want a penalty too? Let me just give you a penalty. Weghorst scored the penalty. It wasn't the cleanest of strikes. The goalkeeper nearly got a hand to it. Honestly, Weghorst, his whole career needs to just go in the bin at this point. Then he gets a boot in the head. And then after that, he just decides, I'm just going to clatter into the next man I see. And he gives away a penalty too. Enzo Fernandez finishes one penalty and then Chelsea get another penalty and Esteval scores it. I actually forgot which penalty Weghorst gave away. I don't really care at this point. Chelsea just scored via penalties and deflections in this game. Even the last goal in the game that was scored by evil Saka, Tyreek George, was again a deflected shot. This game was awful. Despite the goal line, despite the scoreline being 5-1, it was a bad game. Chelsea can take a lot of positives from it because their general play was brilliant. Bino Gittins had a good game. Esteval had a brilliant game. But in terms of just the cleanness of strikes. Bro, don't ever watch this game back. And I actually think the most positive spell in this game that I saw was Tyreek George. You know, Evil Saka has technical ability to die for. I think he's a bit lankier than Saka. He seems more agile. And honestly, I would take him at Arsenal. I would love him to just be a backup winger somewhere. Then from a win that involved many deflections to a win that was just routine. You know, at this point, it's unsurprising. Bayern Munich winning 4-1 against Club Brugge. My Club Brugge. And if you know, you've watched my recaps on the main channel, Club Brugge. The Brugges, bro, they're like my favourite team. Genuinely. And since I covered them the first time and they had an amazing game, they've just been going downhill. This was not one that was fun to watch. And just 5 minutes into this game, we would see a Bayern Munich youngster weave through a bunch of players and score. And his name is Carl. Carl. Lenny's best friend from The Simpsons. Am I right? I never heard of this guy. 17 years old, putting his name on the map. And I'm interested. I'm interested in this 17-year-old. Then Mr. Inevitable showed up in the 14th minute with Harry Kane putting in a cutback that was played by Lima. Then Luis Diaz would grab a goal in the 34th minute and Nicolas Jackson would put the cherry on top of the cake, making it 4-0 to Bayern Munich, and it was a standard performance from these lot, nothing crazy. I will say that Brugge were lively before Carl's, stunner. But the early liveliness was only for 4 minutes. So then we go into arguably the worst, most boring game ever. Real Madrid versus Juventus. This was poor. This was awful. Yeah, this game was an absolute bore fest. It was very boring. You had to have patience, and eventually it would be Vinicius Jr. Wiggling around the defense, trying to score. Rebound would bounce, and then Bellingham would be there. Bellingham. It's good to see you again, man. I've had enough of this Real Madrid team without you. They have no fight. They have no aura. And not genuinely, though. They don't have no power, dynamism. They needed Bellingham back in this game, and he was there when they needed him the most. It happens time and time again. It happened a couple seasons back, and he's back from injury now. And I think that this is where this Real Madrid side is just going to pick up. But their next game is against Barcelona, so we'll have to talk about them then. The Juventus deep block was quite formidable, Both lights have gone out. I'm in the middle of the review. That's how boring this game was. It just turned off all the lights. And do I want to move the camera with the phone? No, I don't want to move the phone. We're just going to have to firm it. Burkinio's actually scared of the dark. So I don't even... Burkinio. Okay, I need to get a light. Someone send me a light. I need to... This game was actually too boring, so let's just move on. Like, honestly, there was so many games. You know what? Because of this light going off, I'm actually just going to end the video there. This is a second channel video anyway, so who's even going to watch to the end? I don't even know. The rest of the games, there was maybe one good game out of all the rest. Let me just read the notes that I have for that. It was Galatasaray winning 3-1 against Bodo Glimt, and Galatasaray as such, they were an up and down team, but coming off that game that they had against Liverpool, this is a really good path that they're about to go on. It's a good trajectory for them. And again, it was Victor Osimhen that is having an outstanding little patch in this season. And I really hope that this continues, because he's been someone that has been a formidable striker in football for, a bunch of years, since his time at Napoli and even before then. And again, he's been doubted time and time again. But in the international stage recently for Nigeria, he came up clutch. And in this game for Galatasaray in the Champions League, after having an outstanding performance against Liverpool, he's come up clutch again and is putting balls into the back of the net. Scooping home a finish in the 3rd minute, and then again in the 33rd minute of this game against Bodo Glimt. Then Galatasaray's Oktoglu would score the 3rd, and then Bodo Glimt would get a consolation goal, which led to absolutely nothing for that side. Sporting would win 2-1 against Marseille, aka Prison FC, and this is a fixture that I'm just so glad that Marseille didn't win. I've had enough. I don't want to see them in this competition anymore because of all the abusers and prisoners that they have in their side. I don't care what people say. You can comment about, the individual brilliance of some of their players. Do you think I'm ever going to cover it? No. because we just don't do that here. And Sporting actually surprised me by winning this game. And it might have been for an Emerson red card for Marseille that Santos would eventually capitalise for Sporting Lisbon, putting them up 2-1 late on in the game and winning the game for Sporting fans. Marseille did have multiple opportunities to take the game via an overturned penalty and many other things, but still, Sporting held their own and came out with the victory. Athletic Club would win 3-1 against Karabag, and then we would have 2 ball draws in Tottenham versus Monaco, which was 0-0, and again, just snooze fest. And then we would have another 0-0, which was Atalanta versus Slavia Prague. As the league stands right now, we've got the likes of PSG, Bayern Munich, Arsenal, Inter and Real Madrid leading the pack. And just below them, we've got the likes of Manchester City, Dortmund and Newcastle. Some sides that bounce back during this round are Chelsea, Sporting and Galatasaray that are slowly making their way up the league phase. And sides that are in a bit of trouble that we have to look out for in the next game week are the likes of, Juventus, Villarreal, Ajax. The race for the golden boot in this competition is also, dominated by easily probably the best 3 strikers in football right now, Harry Kane, Mbappe and Erling Haaland. With Kane and Mbappe both on 5 and Erling Haaland on 4. But the likes of Marcus Rashford are surprising me with 4 as well. Anthony Gordon has 4. Fermin Lopez has 3 and Gabriel Martinelli has 3 as well. And let's not forget Nemecha, who also has 3. And after all the rounds, I think we can say the most dominant teams in this competition so far are the likes of PSG, Bayern Munich, and if I'm being completely honest, Arsenal. They are looking very strong, especially defensively. There is a big game week next week that we will cover properly with hopefully a better light. We will be doing it on this channel, so subscribe for this. We're going to be doing a lot more match reactions here. I need to sort the lighting on this channel, but this will be the setup, the general setup. I'm going to get a light, hopefully, and this will be less effort for me. And hopefully I can just be able to pump out videos on this channel way more often, because the first channel is great, but it does take a lot more effort and I don't want to just pump out nonsense on the channel. So hopefully you guys appreciate this decision. If you're hating on it, then unfortunately you're going to have to get muted because I don't care. I have to make the decisions as the general manager. I am Jose Mourinho. But yeah, there's a massive game week in a fortnight from now, which includes Liverpool versus Real Madrid. And that is a tasty game. Tasty. Of course, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, comment and subscribe. This is just, I don't even know. We don't really do outros on this channel, but yeah, Burkinio says peace out, and I'll see you probably in a couple of days with another video on this channel. Peace.